back. Franco Ripple with the FlyYoungDems.org group, the Southeast Regional Director of Florida FLY. Yeah, it should be FLA, right? Young Dems.
Well, it's Florida Young Democrats. It's pretty much the point. Florida
so it's
Young
FLY.
FLYoungDems.org.
Oh, okay, right. You know, you ought to capitalize the F and the L. And in any case, FLYoungDems.org. Got it. Okay, got it. My apologies, Franco.
Not a problem. It's great to be with you, Tom.
Thanks for joining us. I understand that oligarch Rick Scott, this multimillionaire who now runs your state, has and the Republicans who suck up to him and to oligarchs like the Koch brothers are trying to make it harder and harder and harder after we saw that whole meltdown with Kathleen, what was her name, the Secretary of State?
Catherine Harris.
Catherine Harris, thank you.
Right.
After Catherine Harris knocked, 80,000 African Americans largely off the voting rolls in the 2004 election, as I recall.
And she was handsomely rewarded with about a 35-point loss to Senator Bill Nelson in her Senate campaign, too.
Right. No, this is the 2000 election, actually, wasn't it? It was Bush's first election.
And I think it was the 2006 because he's up for re-election in 2012.
No, but I mean when she took that list from Florida Texans and applied it to the voter lists in Florida and knocked 80,000, as I said, largely African Americans off the rolls.
That's right.
In any case, Florida has a long history going back to Reconstruction of doing everything they can to disenfranchise minorities. And I think, during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was actually a lot of pushback on that. The civil rights movement was very active in the South, and Florida was seen as one of the more progressive states. It seems like, though, it's going in the other direction.
Well, and that's a good reason why Florida is one of actually 9 states that are required under the Federal Voting Rights Act to submit for pre-clearance their redistricting plans, which I hope we'll probably talk about a little bit later on. They're required to submit them to the U.S. Department of Justice because Florida has such a history of not necessarily being so progressive when it came to implementing civil rights. In fact, up until the 1970s, Florida was ruled by a group called the Pork Chop Gang, which was, we didn't even desegregate until the 70s here. So it was pretty sad for a while. Yeah.
So now this oligarch Rick Scott and his buddies in your state and the Koch brothers oligarchs, they want to change the standards for voting in your state to make it harder for poor people to vote and older people to vote. Do I get that right?
That's right, and I'm glad actually earlier in your program you mentioned that it's not just Florida, it's Wisconsin, and it's actually a bunch of states. Believe it or not, it's actually 2/3 of states across the country are either considering or have pushed through voter suppression measures. I actually found the other day there was a New York Times op-ed editorial from, I believe it was April 27th, that actually said there's a very shadowy group called the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is a big business. ALEC, exactly. ALEC is a big business-backed group, and they have been the ones pushing through some of these voter suppression bills. In some cases, the language on these voter suppression bills and constitutional amendments are identical from state to state.
Sure.
And 2/3 are considering them. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, these laws are not written by legislators. They're written by corporate stooges. And so what's being done about this? What are you all doing? How are you pushing back?
Well, that's a great question. We are pushing back. We actually... basically, last legislative session, going back to last year, you remember we had Governor Charlie Crist, who was at one point the front runner for the Republican U.S. Senate nomination in 2010. He began falling behind after the Koch brothers and Tea Party and Americans for Prosperity, after they all started pushing Marco Rubio.
Right.
He eventually decided he needed to run as an independent. So he vetoed some of the worst bills to come out of the legislature last session, and that included Senate Bill 6, which would have stripped teacher tenure. Unfortunately, that did go through very early on in this session. But the point is, from the movement that stemmed to push Governor Crist to veto Senate Bill 6, came Awake the State. That was something that was started back in really January or February of this year. Awake the State was a very grassroots movement that spurred 15,000 people coming out to 31 rallies all across the state of Florida on March 8th, which was the first day of our legislative session. And actually, just yesterday, we had the follow-up rallies called Awake Again May 10. They were a little bit smaller. In part, I think that's because people were beaten down by the fact that the Republican majority in our state House and Senate, and of course our governor, just rammed through some incredibly destructive, very conservative legislation.
Right. Franco, we have just a minute left here. What is the carry-home message about the war on democracy in Florida and what our listeners outside Florida can do about it?
Well, the big problem is that people here in Florida in 2010 voted for what they perceived to be change. The problem is that the Republican Party of Florida has dominated the state of Florida's politics for the last 15 years. Remember, in Florida, you're actually 41% Democrats, 35% Republicans. And yet when you look at our legislature, it's two-thirds. Well,
that's because of gerrymandering.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. That's because independent studies have shown that Florida has the worst case of gerrymandering in the country. Right. So in 2010, we passed Amendments 5 and 6, which will hopefully end gerrymandering forever. So what people need to do are two things. Go to fairdistrictsnow.org and please donate. Do what you can. Support that group because they're going to be the ones defending Amendments 5 and 6 in the Supreme Court, which, by the way, the Speaker of the House tried to split in half in order to pack the courts. Unbelievable thing, and it didn't pass. The other thing is go to awakethestate.com, which is that grassroots organization I mentioned, and we're going to try to do everything we can to keep people up to speed on the fight, the pushback against ending democracy in Florida.
Marvelous. And of course, FL, as in Florida, youngdems.org. Franco Ripple, the Southeast Regional Director. Franco, thanks for dropping by today.